Okay.
So this is going to be day 2.
Yes.
And was there anything that we should be talking about before we look at beeps?
All good on my end.
Yeah, not on my end.
Oh,
The only I'll get stuck into it, but the only thing that I'm going to preface it with is that after last week, yeah, I tried to yesterday be far more mm, like just stop trying too hard and just really be just like, and actually, you know what, this week I got startled by the beep pretty much every time. So I think, like we were talking about, how that first week you're kind of not anticipating it but aware that you're doing it, and yesterday that every time it went off I was like, oh, and then I was like, oh, what was happening? So I'm going to preface it with that.
okay.
Okay, so first beep was 10:10 a.m. So I did this yesterday, Monday morning. And I've written down, yeah, I wrote down, I was thinking about the email I was about to write. Like I was looking at a photo of, I'm a producer, so I was looking at a photo of a Steadicam and anticipating writing the email I was about to write. So what was in my head, not a clear thought, but it wasn't nothing. So that was kind of the distinction that I wanted to make there, in terms of it wasn't as simple as being like, oh, I thought hire that Steadicam. Like, no, that's not what was in my brain when the beep went off. But there was a something more than a nothing.
Mhm. We haven't really decided who's main interviewer for this one.
Well, should you go? You, me.
I could take it. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So it's a something and not a nothing, and you seem pretty certain of that. So I won't fight you on it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was related to an email you were writing about a Steadicam, um, and there was something there. Would you be able to give any more specifics, or you don't think so? You don't know?
I And again, I'm trying not to give like too much context, but to give it context to explain. So like I had a tab open on my computer and I was looking at a photo of this particular camera that I was going to write in an email. Like,
Mhm.
it was almost like my brain was caught not rehearsing and planning out the email that I was then about to write. I think that's too much, but there was like an awareness of that. So it's almost like the step before that. Like I was looking at the photo as the beep went off, and I had this awareness of something, but I wasn't in the process of putting language to that something yet. But it wasn't like we were talking about last week, where it was autopilot, like, just like going from A to B. It wasn't that, but it wasn't as distinctive and clear in terms of language as, oh, that's the camera I want to hire, and dear so and so. Like, it wasn't that.
Okay. So the content isn't specifically formed and planned.
Yes,
Would
not
you?
specifically formed. I like that. Yes.
Okay. But would you say there is content at all, or is it kind of a process without content, or you don't know?
No, I feel like that one was content. I definitely felt that at the time when the beep went off, that, oh, there was something in my brain then. That's different to when we had, yeah, like vacuuming last week, and I could definitely say there was nothing in the brain. This one, there was content, but it wasn't um fully formed, is maybe a nice way to put it, but there was a something.
Um, and in terms of this loose, loose kind of content,
Hmm.
would you be able to give a best guess to what it was, or you're not quite sure?
Well, then I come back to like a knowing of like, it felt like a knowing, like I was looking at a thing, and and I was looking at this picture of the Steadicam, and it was resonating, and I was processing it, but I wasn't at the next point of let's put that into an email about I want to use that camera.
Mhm.
So that I feel like that's kind of as clear as I can be on that.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. Was was the part of looking at the picture of the steady cam, was that in this very moment in your
Yep.
awareness, or okay? And the
Yep.
possibility that it's broader maybe before you were looking, but at this very moment you're just kind of, something else is going on. Is that possible too, or do you think the visual part right before the beep is in your awareness?
No, I think it was more than just the visual part. Like I think that this when the right before the beep, it was more than just seeing a thing. This definitely had a something with it.
Okay, it's more than the visual,
Yeah.
but for the visual part itself, you think right before the beep that part was there, or you're not sure?
Wait, hang on. Sorry. How do you mean?
Um, so right now, I just want to focus on the visual part. If there is a visual part of seeing
Oh,
the
you mean
steady
inside my brain? Sorry.
cam, yeah, yeah, inside your brain, your experience, your mind, whatever.
Yeah. So in terms of like, I'm thinking visual as in like I was looking at my computer, looking at the visual of the camera. But do you mean, yeah, internally in my brain, was there a visual component of that?
Yes, yeah,
I would say no.
okay, no.
No.
So you would say no, but the part that is there is um, something about this steady cam, which is
So it's a really bizarre thing to have been caught in the middle of.
and something about a future email and kind of. So how would you describe it? It's about trying to formulate something for the email, or you're not even formulating it yet. You're kind of like, how would
Yeah.
you describe it?
Yeah. It wasn't at formulation stage. I know when I'm at that stage, and I feel like there were a couple of beeps last week where it was more, I was in that stage and it feels more um, process driven.
Hmm.
This, I wasn't at that point yet. At the moment before the beep, it was the step before that process. So um, it was, yeah, like I keep coming back to a knowing, like um, yeah, I wasn't caught being, I wasn't caught formulating an email. I wasn't caught thinking logically and rationally about
Hmm.
like A to B of this is what I want to say.
Hmm.
Was a step before that, but there was the knowing. This feels very airy fairy, but there was the knowing of. I was caught right in the middle of a process. Like I think this was a really interesting beat. Because it was in between where we've got me previously. So it wasn't just looking and registering, and then it wasn't just doing the
Hmm.
thing, but how to describe what that inner experience was like is really challenging because it just felt like really grounded in a concept and a knowing, but there wasn't a visual experience really per se in inside my brain. Like I'm not seeing the Steadicam inside my brain. I'm not seeing the words of an email. Like there's nothing visual happening at that moment, and there's
Hmm.
no like clear, distinct language or words, but
Hmm.
there's an experience.
Okay, I think I have some idea. So I I want to try asking a couple other questions that I'm not sure where they'll lead, or if they'll just be more confusing or
Yeah.
whatever, because I think pushing for too much specificity on an experience that might not have that much specificity, like
Yeah.
we could get a bit lost.
Hmm.
But maybe I'll throw out suggestions, and if something's totally off the mark, just shoot it down.
Yeah.
But like, were there other qualities to this experience, like, mm, like some kind of desire to write an email, or any kind of feeling or sensory experience or anything like that? Or you're not sure?
No,
Nothing?
I don't think so. Sensory, nah. Um,
Mhm.
mm-mm.
And okay, and I want to clear up because you say a kind of knowing, and it's
Mm.
not about the words, as as Russ said last time, but I am curious if is there a like this kind of process going on and a separate kind of awareness of this process, would you say? Or not at all? Or that distinction doesn't make sense to you?
No, I don't think
Mm,
I feel a distinction there, whether I'm not understanding that properly or whether that's accurate. But it felt like, and you'll see like later for some of my other beeps, I've not had a similar experience to this, so I think
mhm.
that that's important in terms of like sometimes I feel like there's a really obvious nothing is the answer to what was happening inside my head.
Yeah,
This wasn't that, and that's the
yeah.
best way to distinguish that. And I know it doesn't then get like I'm not getting better at describing what
Mhm.
that is, but it's so not nothing. But in terms of what the something is in more um yeah, specific language, I find that really challenging because the inner experience is not uh embedded in visual or any sort of language,
Yeah. So there's no visual component, no language at this moment,
but
and
there's a
no,
something.
there is something. There's not a clear formulated thought that you'd be able to express, but
Yep.
there is something.
Uh-huh.
Okay, I don't have any more questions. Russ?
So I'm happy with that. Let me summarize what I've heard and see whether I'm on the right track. So at the moment of the beep, I understand that I am in some way processing something about a video cam and an email and something about that, and that is experientially ongoing for me. It's not just I'm inferring that because I'm looking at it that I'm going to about to write an email, but there's
Hmm.
something experiential about it.
Hmm.
But there's nothing very specific or at all specific about that processing. I recognize myself to be processing, but the specifics of it but there are no specifics of it.
Hmm. Yep.
Okay, then I'm good.
I'm
Number
good.
two.
um,
Okay. Number
just
two.
maybe
Oh
one
yeah, sorry, go.
technical note. Yeah, maybe you'll know this now, or we could talk about it later too. But just words like processing, I think part of the DS is to really get into what people mean by that, because it's like a common term that you
Hmm.
might hear. Like it comes from kind of computers and processing these metaphors. But I guess part of the method is getting under these terms.
Hmm.
So do you have thoughts on that, Russ?
Well, I thought you ruled out quite a bit of the possibilities, and
Yeah.
I elected not to try to rule out any more possibilities because I thought you'd sort of done enough about that.
Mm.
But I agree that the term processing is ambiguous and or inchoate or something like that. And I thought that sort of matched her experience at this particular time. And given that this is the second sampling day, I wasn't motivated to try to get more to it than that.
Okay. Sure. Let's move to the second sample.
Okay, so the second one went off at 10:13, which is only 3 minutes later. So I was very startled. um, but here I was writing the email, so I've noted that I was just on autopilot doing a thing. I wrote. I wouldn't say my brain um, I wouldn't say my brain was empty or that there was nothing there per se, but it was just doing the thing that I was doing at the time, which was writing an email. So I feel like this inner experience was sort of more in line with the vacuuming and things that we had last week, and this felt very different to the first beep that we've just discussed because this felt more Like, so right before the beep, I was just quite literally writing the email. I was not halfway through a sentence thinking about like the rest of it. I was halfway through doing the sentence, and then I got started and it went off, and I just wrote that my inner experience was kind of just autopilot of doing the physical act. So in terms of in my brain, was I audibly hearing what I was typing? No. Was I seeing the words or concepts that I was typing? No. I was just sitting there doing the thing.
So the words are skillfully coming out of my fingers onto my keyboard.
Yes.
And my brain is no doubt doing that.
Yeah.
But I don't have any experience of my brain doing that.
Yeah.
That's that these sentences, this reasonable thing that I'm writing is coming out of me. And I don't experience myself as planning about what I'm about to say. I don't experience myself even in the inchoate way that we talked about in the first beep.
No, I don't believe so.
So this is like the vacuuming.
Yeah.
Except that the task in the vacuuming was to move a machine around the rug or whatever. And here the task is to end up with words written on a computer screen.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as my experience is concerned, I don't experience this as being, I don't have any verbal experience beyond that.
No, yeah, I would say that the experience is actually very similar for me, despite one resulting in language and one being a physical act. In terms of inner experience of the two, I think it's really similar, because I don't think that there was this, that there wasn't a, like, when the beep went off, there wasn't this, there's not a clear gap between the words that I'm writing and them. They're not being rehearsed in my head as they're coming out or anything. It's just all happening at once. So inside my brain, it's sitting there doing the thing. It's not, there's no step before it where it's mulling it over inside my brain before they're coming out of my fingers.
Okay. So I'm happy with that.
I'm still curious.
Yep.
Is it different than nothing? Is it different from not experiencing anything?
Yeah, it is. And that is a challenging thing to describe, because how I would try and differentiate that is, it's an experiential difference in that almost like my inner, like it's more alert. I'm hesitant when I say that, but like it almost feels, do you know what I want to say is, when I say that there was nothing, it's like the inner experience is dormant. And when I say that there's something, it's not dormant, but it's not easy to articulate what the something is quite often, because it's not fully formed in that way of like audio or visual, or it's not that. But there's a clear I can feel the difference of when I say it's nothing, I'm sort of, it's as though it's asleep. And more like in a zen state, whereas when it's something, it's not that. And the easiest way to describe it is just that of like, well, it's not nothing. But then trying to describe the something, which I understand is what we're trying to do, is kind of challenging, but I can feel the difference.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
So I think I lost the predicate of that question. So is this beep in the nothing category, whereas the first beep was in the more than nothing category?
I would say this one is still not fully nothing. So the first one was clearly a something, and I would say this one wasn't clearly a nothing. But This is so ambiguous.
Okay.
But because I think, to me, there is a difference. The next 4 beeps are you'll see, but like, there's a difference between the nothing, but kind of like autopilot nothing, and the nothing. But whether that is, now I'm getting too context based, but I was going to say whether that's linked to the particular activity or lack thereof that I'm doing, perhaps that's what I'm getting confused by. But anyway, so I would say the first one was very much, a something. There was thought, but this one I'm doing something, but there's less like conscious thought.
And by comparison to the vacuuming beep.
Yeah, the vacuuming beep, I think it's still it's shades of nothingness, isn't it? That's what we're getting to. So I think
Slightly above zero, but not at zero.
Yeah,
and
I think so.
And that's pretty much the same distance above zero in the present beep as the vacuuming beep.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, maybe like this one slightly more, but shades.
Okay. And I think I'm good.
Number 3.
Okay, well, I don't know if I want to spoil your party too, but for the next 1, 2, 3, 4 beeps, they've all got the same answer.
That makes it easy.
Let's do one at a time.
So the next one is 10:49, and I wrote nothing. I said I just closed Instagram on my phone when the beep went off. Like, there was no thought about what the next task was going to be. So I wrote nothing, and I was annoyed at the time because I want more language, but I was trying to not overthink it. And the very obvious way to describe what was my inner experience was nothing.
Okay. I don't think there's no reason to get annoyed. If that's what the experience is. But so in beep number 2, it was not nothing. It was a little bit of something.
Shades. Yeah.
And here you wrote nothing.
Yeah.
Is this one actually nothing, you think? Or maybe a little minimal something? Okay.
No, this one felt like fully nothing. Because in the way of the one before this, which was a bit shades of nothing, there was still, and I'm reluctant to use your least favorite word, processing, but I was still like...
I don't not like that word.
But I was still processing something. So I feel like my inner experience was still sort of firing. Like I was still, even though it's autopilot-y or whatever, the brain's ticking over. What that looks and feels like is, as we're hearing, difficult to explain. But then by comparison, this beep felt really nothing. And coming back to what I was saying earlier about like the word dormant feeling really nice, that's sort of what this experience felt like. There's nothing to latch onto in terms of trying to describe that.
Yeah. To just make up numbers, let's say beep number 2 maybe was like 1% of experience or something. Is it possible that this one is like 0.1% or something very small? Or do you think fully 0 is more accurate to it, or you're not sure?
I'm not sure. I would never say like a 0, but yeah, it didn't feel like there was anything happening that I could just distinguish.
And I don't have any more questions on this.
So I have a couple. So you have just closed Instagram, is that correct?
Yes, I had just like when the beep went off, I was like, oh, what's happening inside my brain? And I realized it had like, that had just happened just before the beep went off. So in terms of physical activities or whatever, I was sort of caught in between any, and but my brain hadn't like moved on to thinking about what I was going to do next. And I wasn't necessarily caught in that autopilot phase that I've sort of discussed. But there was no conscious or thought that I was aware of beyond that.
So what I want to get at is what I don't. I would like to explore this word inner a little bit, or the experientialness of inner. So I think it's possible to have your eyeballs aimed at the computer screen, which I gather is a fact of the universe. My eyeballs were aimed at the computer screen.
Mm-hmm.
And do I see the computer screen? Or and by that I mean, do I have any experience of that? Because our sensory aspects can be aimed at something and I don't experience it at all.
Mm.
Or I could be, my eyeballs could be aimed at it and I could be seeing the computer screen.
Mm.
So, for example, right now your backside is on the chair, and now that I call your attention to it, you can feel the sensations from that.
Mm-hmm.
But probably
Yes.
you haven't been paying much attention to that for the last 15 minutes because you've been trying to think about something else.
Correct.
But the processing, we'll use that word again, you've been processing that information entirely outside of your experience, your
Mm-hmm.
directly apprehended experience. So my question is about the eyeballs aimed at the computer screen. Is it just my eyeballs are aimed at it and I'm not processing it at all? I'm not experiencing it at all?
Mm. Yeah, maybe that sort of feels, yeah.
And what I want to be clear about is that inner experience is not necessarily something that seems to be happening inside. Like if I see a sunset, for example, and I can be into the orange of the gold of the sunset, well, that's clearly out there. But I would still call that an inner experience, even though it's clearly, it's not that I'm paying attention to my paying attention. That would be sort of a meta kind of experience. But I'm involved with the sunset. I'm seeing the sunset experientially. I would still call that an inner experience.
Mm.
So the question is, am I seeing the computer screen and involved with the computer screen, or I've just turned that off, as just like I've turned my backside off?
I think on these occasions it's turned off because I can, and I know we want to keep this to the beeps, but I can think of times where what you're describing I have experienced. So comparatively, no, on these ones it's turned off. If anything, I don't think that there's like an experience to it.
Then I'm good with this one.
And to clarify, it's your phone screen or a computer screen?
Yeah, this beep was my phone screen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Move on to number 4.
Number 4.
Well, I don't know how much fun you're going to have. It was 11:33 and I've written down nothing.
And is there context about that, or?
No, I was inside, like I was doing all the same things. So I was working from home and I was doing, all the same sort of stuff, like wandering around my house or writing emails or whatever. But I think like on this one, I was in between making a cup of tea, and it was just a really clear nothing. It was dormant. There was no inner experience to like go off what you were saying before of like, I know what you're talking about when you actually experience something. But this wasn't that.
So I'm making tea. Is that as a fact of the universe? Is that right?
I was in between, like, honestly, I think I was like walking over to my tap to fill up the kettle. Like I was in between doing anything of note.
Okay. So context-wise, I'm walking towards the sink.
Yeah.
And And I understand you to be saying that experientially, this is even less than vacuuming.
Yeah.
They're both physical activities. They both involve some kind of motor act and some kind of visual act. I'm no doubt seeing where I'm walking to, and no doubt seeing what I'm vacuuming. But in this particular beep, there's no even slight, as far as we can say, inchoate kind of experience about it. There's nothing.
No, because yeah, I feel like, and maybe, and again, you can knock me down if I'm drawing too many, joining too many dots here. But I feel like in the vacuuming, because I kind of, that's a task that I like really sort of settle into, and then so experientially, or like, I don't want to use stupid words, but like, so I am experiencing the thing that I'm doing because it's gone on for long enough for me to like to settle into the moment, maybe. Whereas like this went off, and I just wasn't, I wasn't there. Like I wasn't aware of anything I was doing inside my head. And experientially, like like truly, there was nothing to note. I didn't feel particularly tied to any of the physical activity I was doing. My brain wasn't thinking about an email I need to send in an hour or anything like that. None of that. I just, no.
Okay. So I don't want us to get lost in trying to speculate about why these things happen. So
Yeah, I know. Sorry.
the settled in portion, well, that may be true and maybe not true. I'm not disbelieving that. I just
Okay.
I think there's a rabbit hole to go down, and I'd rather not go down that. So what I am interested in is the experiential aspect, and what I'm gathering is that there is some experience of the vacuuming, not a great deal, but some,
Mhm.
and there's no experience of the traversing the distance between here and the sink.
Yep. Yep.
Okay. I'm good with that then.
And if you compare it to beep number 3, which is also nothing,
Same level of nothingness.
the same nothingness. So there's no experiential difference between number 3 and number 4, or slightly different flavors of nothingness. So,
No,
so no difference. Okay.
no. They both felt like the bottom level of nothingness.
Yeah. All right.
So I guess I would let me, before we go on to number 5, I guess it is. But I think, Mel, you're doing a great job. And I personally don't have any theories about whether having nothing is a good idea or a bad idea. That's above my pay grade to make that kind of a determination. I could make an argument that nothing is the best kind of experience, and I could make the argument that nothing is a waste of a few seconds. But and I and I don't know the answer to that. My interest is in just what the experience is, and we'll leave the evaluation to the omniscient being who can do those kinds of things.
Great. That's part 2 of this.
Number 5.
Okay. This went off at midday exactly, and I've written nothing. And so, for context, for this one, I was like getting changed. So like I had a hoodie on, and had it the my earpiece in, and the thing was in my pocket, and I was like just sort of about to take my hoodie off and swap into another top, and it went off halfway through that, because I remember, because I was like, oh, where's the button to turn this off? But yeah, I wrote nothing. Nothing. There was nothing particularly experiential about it. Was I, like Russ, how you say before about sort of the awareness of like the feeling of the chair right now, when you bring that to my awareness and things like that, like in that same line of thinking, was I like super aware of the jumper I was putting on, and how that felt or like that process, like no, I was dormant in this moment.
Okay. So the exact process is you're taking off a hoodie
Yeah,
and it's midway through. It's kind of like over your head or something.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. And the beep goes off. And before you mentioned something like some thought like, oh, where's the, I didn't hear the word exactly. Where's the sleeve? Where's the hood? Where's the,
No, where's the beep? Because I was sort of halfway through taking it off, and then the beep's going off, and I'm like, "Where is
okay.
the thing?" Because it was still going up.
So that was after the beep happened. That wasn't
Yes,
before.
correct. That's how I recall this actual moment very clearly. But prior to the beep going off,
Mhm.
not like there's nothing.
Okay. And if you go back and really try to remember, are you sure there's not some sensory component of pulling it off?
I don't think so.
Okay. Yeah. I, I was trying to see if you could be suggested to think there was an experience. So that I don't think that was a good question, but I wanted to kind of see.
I don't
Um,
think so. No,
so, what other questions to ask about nothing? Russ
I
had all
know.
kinds
Sorry,
of cool questions to ask about nothingness.
I know.
Um, and if you compare it to the previous two nothings, would you say?
Yeah, the same. All of my last four felt like exactly the same experience, whereas those first two we went through felt different, and particularly the first beep
Mm-hmm.
felt a really distinct difference to these last ones. Um,
Mm-hmm.
like that first one when I was sort of there was a something, there was thought but not a clear and distinct thought, whereas in these
Mm-hmm.
there's none of those. I'm not particularly like aware of the feeling of anything around me. I'm not um, particularly like there's not like emotions or like whatever. So in terms of sensory experience, like none of that stood out,
Mm-hmm.
and I wasn't because it doesn't even necessarily feel like, yeah, again back to like the vacuuming sort of autopilot thing that we've identified. It doesn't feel like that though either, really, and I don't know how to articulate the difference very well, I think, but like because how we've said like that feels like a degree of nothingness, like a step up from a something, like
Mm-hmm.
whereas this there's just not, I'm not aware of anything.
Mm-hmm. Do you think? Hmm, do you think it's possible that you just don't remember anything that happened? Like the beep comes and you're surprised and it shocks it out of you and you can't really remember? Or
Yeah, I think maybe because I again don't want to add over context, but like I know I have a really bad memory, but like the beep goes off and then I jot down like immediately, so I can't forget it that fast.
Mhm.
So like whether I can't remember it super well now, is it, that's probably very likely, but when I write this down immediately after it goes off, and the overwhelming thing to write down was just nothing, then I
Yeah,
have to trust that because it's so quickly.
yeah, the method is designed to override kind of long-term memory demands. Um, but I guess earlier today you mentioned being startled by these beeps. Like when the
Hmm.
beep comes, are you kind of startled and shaken out of yourself,
Hmm. Yep.
or okay?
Yep. For all of these yesterday, I was really.
So you were startled by the beep. It was surprising.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I definitely kind of gotten used to it in, as opposed to a little bit last week, you're sort of always anticipating the beep, whereas I
Hmm.
wasn't yesterday.
Do you think it's startling in a way where oh it happens and now you try to remember what your experience was and it makes it difficult, or is it
Yeah.
surprising and you try to remember but there is nothing there.
I feel like there's a bit of that still, and maybe that will, this might be different again next week. But I think you're right there of like I get startled, and then maybe in the process of the startle, I'm like, what was he? And then I find it a little bit challenging to identify, like maybe, and I think that's like a muscle that I suspect I'll get a little better at, but there was nothing obvious to grab at.
Okay, it's not about me being right. I don't want to. I'm not really doubting you in trying to present other theories and it has to be something. We have to come up with a reason why there's nothing. I'm not trying to do that, but just kind of see if I throw other possibilities at you, will any of them kind of stick or not really? But it's fine too if you say like it was startled, but I could still tell that my experience there's nothing going on. So, but I guess
I think the language that I would use there is like, and whether it's a memory thing or a startle thing or whatever, is that I don't feel like 100% confident to be like, well, I have some hesitation saying this, but what I'm trying to say is like, as to the best of my ability to recall straight after the beep goes off, I feel like it was nothing. Whether like because there was nothing that stood out. So whether that is definitively I was experiencing nothing, or whether it's like I haven't been able to accurately feel or describe or identify that, I'm not sure. Like, I can't be definitive about that at the moment, but but the flip side of that is like it definitely wasn't something. This is all so ambiguous. I'm so sorry.
It definitely wasn't something. Okay, so I'm done with my line of questioning. I guess I wanted to kind of probe and test to see like how resilient, how confident you were of your experience. And you said that like you weren't 100% confident, but to the best of your ability to describe, that's what it was. And and I don't doubt that. Yeah, I don't think the method can ever be like 100% confidence. We just try to do the best we can. Do you have anything to add, Russ?
Well, I would say first off that describing nothing is among the hardest things to describe, and so I think we're doing an adequate job of trying to do that. I also think it's possible to have no inner experience at all. So and I would make that argument by sort of subtraction. Well, are you innerly speaking? No, I'm not innerly speaking. And are you seeing a visual image? No, I'm not seeing a visual image. Am I having sensory awareness of the hoodie being pulled over my arm? Well, I'm not doing that. And is there anything left over? Well, there might be something left over, but I'm not. I'm
not trying to describe that. If everything you said is where I feel like I'm at, like I can confidently tick, no, it's not that, it's not that, it's not that, and then okay, well, try and describe what's left. Well, that's tricky.
Right. And I would say I've actually written a paper called "Little or Nothing in Experience" or something like that, in which I have made the argument that it's not necessarily possible to distinguish between those two things.
Yeah.
But between almost nothing in experience and nothing in experience is too far down into the weeds to be able to be confident about it. So we're going to do the best we can, and we might learn something about how to do that from you, who seem to have maybe more practice it than in the nothing end than some people do. We might find something out about that. So shall we take a look at number 6, see whether there's anything to be said about that?
Sure. This was at 12:41, and I'd just made porridge for a lovely lunch, and I've written down the same thing. Nothing. I hadn't quite started eating it yet, but I'd made it. I think again, I was walking back over to my desk, and it went off like right before I sat down. I think it was even in mid-conversation with my sister. I can't recall what it was about. Like, we were just talking about nothing. Like, you know, I probably said to her, "Do you want some as well?" or something. Like, it wasn't. I mentioned that because I wasn't on my own and in silence or whatever. Like, I think that, anyway, maybe there's too much context. But in terms of experience, nothing in the way that the previous few have felt. I wasn't overly aware of anything.
So is what's going on in the real world at the moment of this beep is a conversation between you and your sister?
Yeah, but I haven't written down what it was, but I wrote that was chatting to my sister. Perhaps I should have written down exactly what we were talking about.
And do you recall at the moment of the beep whether you're speaking or whether she's speaking?
I think I actually was mid-sentence, yeah.
So you're speaking?
Yeah.
But even that is not in your experience?
No. Like, not in an... Yeah, okay. It's... Like, no, I didn't think... In terms of... Because how... Like, I know I can hear the words come out of my mouth, but not... I find that hard to answer.
So let me lay out some possibilities, and it doesn't have to be any one of these, but
Okay.
it's possible that the words are coming out of my mouth, and I'm just not paying attention to them at all. In the same sense that I was typing in beep 2 or whatever it was, and the words were coming out of my fingers, and they seem to be just flowing out without my consciousness, I guess you would say, of them. It could be like that. Mm-hmm. Or it could be that I'm speaking and it just doesn't seem so important that I shouldn't even bother to remember what it was. But at the moment, I was recognizing myself to be speaking.
I think more the first bit of like just words are flowing out, but then by the same token, like it was inconsequential sort of chat.
So in that case, one could say I was walking towards my desk. I was speaking at the same time. And at the moment of the beep, the fact of the universe was that my left arm was swinging forwards while my right foot was swinging forwards. But I wasn't paying attention to my left arm swinging. I wasn't paying attention to my right foot plopping. And I wasn't paying attention to the words that were coming out. All of that was coming out of my body, mm-hmm. including the words, but with no more recognition, no more verbal recognition than gait recognition. Is that right?
Yes, correct. Yes.
Okay. Yep. And I think I'm good about that.
I'm good too.
And I would say I find the conversations interesting. So I don't want Mel to be thinking, excuse me, well, I don't have anything interesting to say. All I've got is nothing. Because I think the exploration of nothing is a challenge and has its own interests and intricacies and whatever. So
yeah, I would say it's the opposite of not being interesting because nothing is very contested. I mean, I wouldn't normally present psychology research to participants, but like a lot of people very fiercely debate that people can have times in their consciousness with no experience. There's the continuity hypothesis that we always have some kind of experience. Yeah. When I talk about some DS samples where people don't have experience in a sample, people can be vehement that can't be possible. The method's off, the people raises it. So, yeah, I think it's very interesting.
So I would caution us not to get caught up in trying to answer that question. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What I would say is that we should try to describe the experience as best we can, recognizing that there is a debate out there. I'm not saying that we should put our heads in the sand about that, but I would say we should not explicitly try to answer that question. We should provide as good as high fidelity description as we can, and let people who are interested in making that distinction look at what we've done if they want, and which they probably don't, because that would screw up their theories. But we shouldn't try to enter into that debate. We should try to get Mel's experience as it is.
Definitely not in the DS interviewing part.
It is kind of like, but I hear what you're saying, Julian, in terms of like, it is a bit comforting for me, because when I write down like nothing, and you're like, well, it feels like a bit of a full stop. But yeah, at the same time, I'm trying to not overthink it and get too like meta about it, and like try and really be conscious of that. And if that's what I felt like what is the right response at the time, then that's chill. So, but also, and I mean, I know we just focus on the beeps, but like in doing this, I've become more aware of sometimes when the answer isn't nothing, like just in my real life, and we have to wait for beeps to go off when that is the case. But so for me, I know that like I feel confident in my answers because I've been able to identify other times that isn't the case. So I don't feel like I'm just not able to articulate the experience. I feel like good about it.
Yeah, and we tried to throw a lot of things at you, like are you sure it wasn't seeing? Are you sure, like, if you compare it to this? So I think we tried to throw different things at you to see how you would respond, and if you would be like, oh, maybe there was some visual component.
Yeah.
But I think you clarified everything.
It's a complicated task because it's not about the words, and yet it's obviously about the words. Like, we've used the word nothing a lot today. And our task is to try to make sure as best we can that we understand what we mean when we're saying nothing. And because some people can say, well, I was doing nothing, and what they mean by that was that they were actually doing something particularly, but they didn't think it counted or whatever. And other people say I was doing nothing, and they meant absolutely nothing. We got to figure that out.
Yeah, that's a good note. Yeah, I agree.
So shall we do it again?
Yes. Okay. Well, do you want to stick to this? Like this same time, same place next week works really well for me again, if that suited everyone.
Works for me.
Works for me. So we're talking Tuesday the 24th at 8 o'clock, 11 o'clock, and 5 o'clock. 8 o'clock for me.
Yep, 11 for me. Yep. Is that good with you, Julian?
Yes.
All right.
Fabulous.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Cool. Are there any other... I know you're going to say no, but are there any other notes, anything that is helpful for me to note down at the times or whatever, but you're going to say no?
Nah. If you've got questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Is it helpful for you if I note more context about my physical self during the beep in terms of the action I was doing or where I was located or...
Well, go ahead.
It's a little bit helpful, but it's not totally necessary. You don't need to know everything. If you made yourself a nice dinner, we don't need to know like exactly what's on the plate if it's not in your experience. But just as much context to kind of understand the experience. Like to know that if you're midway through making tea and filling the kettle, like I think that's a good amount of information on my end.
So I would have answered by that question by saying, I don't really care about what you were doing at all. except as it helps to describe your experience or lack thereof. So I'm interested in your experience, and if it's going to be helpful to say, well, I was filling the kettle or whatever, then I'm interested in that.
Yeah. But the last four beeps were, as you said, no discernible difference in experience between the beeps. I still think for description, it's a little bit nice to say, well, this one was nothing during kettle filling. This one was nothing
Yeah.
during this. So, but yeah, generally I'd agree.
So the distinction that I think you and I are making there, Julian, is that what it sounds like to me is you're making a recommendation to Mel that she should make note of what she's doing. And I am making a recommendation to Mel that she pay particular attention to her experience, and I don't care about her, what she's doing. And that's a big difference from my point of view, because you're in, to my ear, anything that interferes with Mel's going directly at her experience as best Mel can go at her experience is a mistake. It reduces the fidelity because it puts an overlay on there. Well, Julian wants to know about what I'm doing, so I gotta tell him about that. And I would say that's risky.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, just to take nothing away from just describing the experience.
That's exactly right.
Full to know like a tiny bit, but yeah, I see your point of being very pure about just the experience. Yeah.
The DES task is really simple. Let's pay attention to experience, and nothing else.
Yeah.
But almost everybody wants to get something else into there, and that's I'm not sure why that is, but that is the way it is, and I resist that.
Yeah. And it just will come with time, but I feel confident in like my ability to I know there are times in life where sometimes I'm really experiencing the cold or the whatever or a particular scent. So I know what you mean. It's just none of the physical stuff for those, particularly the last 4 beeps yesterday, were particularly relevant.
Yeah. Well, we'll find out.
We will. All right.
All right.
That's me.
Thank you very much. Next time, same